You're all internet inclined, so I'm sure you've seen the not quite funny but entertaining tweet about the guy who's trying to budget for his family while spending thousands and thousands of dollars on candles. Yeah, well, on an unrelated note, here's me and my new Filson Mackinaw wool single cruiser in forest green. I mean, really, this is kind of a must-have for all those nasty hipsterish youth getting into workwear and whatnot, but if you're not insane like me and don't want to spend $600 on a glorified jacket, then boy do I have the solution for you. So how about this? A compromise on price, but not on quality. That same 100% virgin wool construction in a fine-looking forest green. A lineup of button-ups in that same beautiful buttery black smooth hardware. Those iconic symmetrical double-breasted box-style pockets, and a 100% polyester fleece lining. Whoa, okay. So what exactly are you trying to sell to me? Why, obviously, it's the Filson Micro Mackinaw Wool Cruiser. Before your Packer, your double, your single, it's the .5, the Micro. The tag right there, it says Pendleton and Micro Mackinaw. Wouldn't that be the Filson work jacket? Shut up. And besides, they're both Pendleton products anyways. Really? Yes, really. I mean, where do you think they source their wool? I mean, it's on some of the product tags. Don't you pay any attention? Well, for a while. Now they actually have a source in Italy. But, you know, that's besides the point anyways. Oh, I'm picking up what you're putting down. You see, I always thought it was something done in-house, but if Filson sources their wool from Pendleton Woolen Mills or Italy, then what makes a Mackinaw wool cruiser of Mackinaw wool? Actually, I was showing off my wardrobe, but sure. What makes a Mackinaw? Well, what makes a name? Mackinaw derives from Mackinaw, or the colonial era trading artery amidst the upper peninsula of what would become Michigan. However, centuries before Mackinaw wool coats would become the icon that they are today, European settlers would be fraternizing with First Nations in the area to quell the rocketing demand back home for beaver pelt top hats. I'm of course describing the North American fur trade, a colonial Native American barter relationship that, starting in the 1600s, lasted about 300 years. And as mentioned, before dinero there was barter, and the Europeans traded all sorts of utilitarian goods with the First Nation peoples, but for particular attention in today's video, European woolen blankets. Meh. Of course, the lack of sheep around made this a highly novel, highly sought after, highly useful item to the First Nations people, and at some point in time, requests were being sent back and forth to make these even more attractive as trading goods. For blankets to be made in varying degrees of thicknesses relative to an area's climate, and as well as to be made in very iconic patterns that we still see today, such as the Hudson Bay Stripes or Buffalo Check. Now, focusing in on the Mackinaw trading region, the centerpiece of such would of course be a certain Fort Michilimackinac, positioned on what is now known as simply Mackinaw or Turtle Island. Now, this wee piece of land, of course, exchanged hands several times over the tumultuous colonial period, originally a French fort turned British post-conquest, then at the turn of the 18th century following the American War of Independence, seceded to the Americans. Being central to the area, this was not only a strategic location for controlling trade, but a well-off military position, especially important as British and American tensions grew over the late 1810s. So, the British garrison at Fort Michilimackinac did not completely abandon the area, but instead repositioned themselves to Fort St. Joseph, on the island of St. Joseph. They were not very creative people. Being quite frigid, of course, the folk stationed there in what was now 1811 thought to themselves, "It is cold as shit!" And bureaucrats being as they are, slow, the fine Canadian Englishmen, captained by one Charles Roberts, decided to do something about it themselves, or the closest thing to, and commissioned the help of local Métis craftsman / English loyalist John Askin Jr. to, with the help of his wife and other local Métis craftswomen, designed and produced the first 40 greatcoats for the soldiers stationed there at Fort St. Joseph. Now, you may be guessing that these first 40 coats would become the first Mackinaw coats, and you would be correct, but the question still remains, what's the connection between the soldiers and the fur trade and the storekeep? Well, of course, going back, First Nations people have had a long history of utilitarian ethic and craftsmanship towards their available resources, so it's really no surprise that during and following the fur trade, natives in the region would repurpose their European woolen blankets that were imported with the cold Mackinaw climate specifically in mind into great blanket coats, which were already perfect for the climate. So when it came time for the soldiers at Fort St. Joseph to commission their own blanket coats at the aid of local Métis or half-native craftsmen, the most readily available and frankly obvious thing to do was adopt this historic native practice and take these Mackinaw region blankets and adopt them into military-ready garb. And this is the reason that the Mackinaw coats are so intimately associated with the buffalo check pattern today, because that's what was available. Captain Roberts originally requested a traditional navy blue, but they didn't have enough. So there it is. What makes a Mackinaw is the culmination of European woolen blankets designed specifically with the Mackinaw trading region in mind, repurposed with the traditions of native peoples, and then finally met with the needs of a modest grouping of Canadian soldiers.
Well, almost. You know, I wouldn't quite say that's blanket length, right? Yeah. I guess not. Okay then. Months later, the War of 1812 has officially broken out. And of course, the Mackinaw region will be vitally useful in the coming months. Now, Captain Roberts realizes this and figures with his middling crew of still about 40 men, a solid defense at Fort St. Joseph is not possible. So, on the summer night of July 17th, Roberts takes to the offensive and paddles his small force of trained soldiers as well as an additional conscripted league of about 150 French, English, Canadian settlers, as well as an additional grouping of 300 to 400 indigenous peoples, all to the shores of Fort Michilimackinac, and officially notices the American soldiers stationed there that war has been declared. And not declared in the metaphorical sense with like an overwhelming show of force, declared as in politely because nobody even fired a shot. Now, considering the lack of bodies, Captain Roberts had about 400 to 500 other men to clothe, and sometime in between 40 and hundreds of coats, one of the messenger boys got so sick of running and skiing and jumping in a glorified robe that he said, "Can we just have someone cut this damn thing in half?" And someone did, and then of course now we have the more practical and recognizable style of the Mackinaw coat. So there you go. That's what makes a Mackinaw. Everything else and then the ingenuity of some messenger boy. Well, surely not every Mackinaw is made in Mackinaw. Yeah, well, you know, I guess that's true too. So following the War of 1812, veterans from the region would diffuse all over Western North America, and the Mackinaw wool coats would continue to gain recognition, popularity, and production as a workwear item. You see, during this period of history and as per British desires, the Canadian economy was overwhelmingly blue-collar and rural, because clearly a little bit too much industrialism starts to rile the spirits. Hence, not only a massive trapping industry, but logging, fishing, etc. Go figure that such a versatile garment, already prepared for the cold climate, would go on to be used by loggers and hunters, and at some point people interested in the mid-19th century gold rush and whoever was in need. Now, eventually, keen North American entrepreneurs would catch on, and companies like Woolrich, Hudson Bay, eventually Carr's, Duluth, Filson would all capitalize on the ability to mass produce and sell such Mackinaw styling of coats. And of course, these companies would go on to advertise to a broader market, first as a recreational sportswear item, and then eventually as casual garb. And with good reason, the utility of such a coat has already been proven in professional instances, so what's to stop your average Joseph from picking up the old cruiser? Oh, okay, style, not region. I guess that sort of makes sense, but what about the collar and the epaulettes? Oh, what are you talking about? Well, the examples you showed me, there's epaulettes and the collars. They're not stepped like this, Filson.
stepped collars are more useful. They're easier to button. Is that even true? And besides, what about all these Mackinaw examples from the early 20th century? Like you said, brands like Duluth were responsible for bringing the Mackinaws to the general audience, so, I mean, how is this similar in any way? And, I mean, look at this forum post I found. Apparently, the Mackinaws were used in the military during this time too, and they don't look anything like this. I mean, these were replicating what was on the consumer market already, and theoretically what was most widely available. There's no shawl color, there's no belt. Shouldn't these theoretically be the most Mackinaws? Okay, then you nerd, it's the wool. That's what makes a Mackinaw. Wool. Wool? That doesn't make any sense. You know how much wool varies from garment to garment? Its thickness, I mean, from what sheep it came, its general construction, how tight it was wove. Just go to Wikipedia. Why are you even here? Mackinaw wool is a heavy and dense, water-repellent woolen cloth. Well, these are canvas. Okay, fine. You know what? You want something vague, all-encompassing, metaphysical, Plato boy? The Mackinaw is North America. It represents European industrial powers and the great ideas and peoples that they brought to the New World. It represents First Nations and their historic traditions of respecting and utilizing a cherished good to the best of their ability. It represents the literal melting pot of these ideas together and a new generation of half-native and half-American peoples finally willing to put these together. And all of this to form a great Mackinaw wool coat for these Canadian English soldiers coming together and defending their land. And you know what? Not even 40 British Canadian soldiers, but 150 other peoples from all around the European world. And not only them, but hundreds and hundreds of natives that have centuries of history with this land. They're all coming together, and it was the first time that these people that would become Canada came together and said, we will fight for our land together. So does it really matter? The presence of a collar, the shape of a belt? I say no. That it's a virtue of the Mackinaw that only something so North American could take so many forms and still be one. So there, I tell you, what makes a Mackinaw is North America. This is made in China.